Hopefully not myself.
Right.
Somebody
Okay.
took my spot.
Yeah, well, we've changed the...
Did you want to sit here?
No.
We have changed, as you can see, because we're getting ready for our Shabbos meal. If anybody wants to sit on the bigger, thicker chairs...
Do you want me to get a bigger chair for you, sir?
No, it's fine, man. I'm a small guy.
Okay.
Well, you could have a kisei kavod, you know.
Well, the kisei covered is inside, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the page number, Rabbi?
Okay, so let's, as we're going to do, so we're going to start with an overview, as we like to do now every week, an overview of the Parsha, and then we're going to get into some politics. Some good old-fashioned politics.
We don't need no
But not the politics of America,
That's right.
not the politics even of Israel. The politics of
Iran.
Well, not even the politics of Iran. The politics of Sedom and Amorah, because it is fascinating. And you may or may not wish to draw conclusions to how things are going nowadays, but certainly there are some fascinating discussions about Sedom. So we start off this week's Parsha with Avraham Avinu having... he had his bris at the end of last week's Parsha, which, according to the Perkei de Rabbi Lezer, was on Yom Kippur. That he had the bris on Yom Kippur, and that's why Hashem originally chose that day when Avraham did that special miracle and the blood that he spilled from the bris milah. And he also says, contrary to what the Gemara says, that the Akedah at the end of the Parsha, the binding up of Yitzchak, was on Rosh Hashanah. He says that was also on Yom Kippur. It was the same day. Many years later, most people interpret that Yitzchak was 37, so that would be 38 years later. However, the Ibn Ezra said no, that Yitzchak was a small boy at the time. And it doesn't give an exact age, but he said Yitzchak wasn't too old, wasn't bar mitzvah yet. So there are differences of opinions what ages these things happen. But it's the third day. Avram is getting restless. He's had no guests, and God is trying to keep him calm and relaxed to heal from his surgery, and God is having none of it. So he sends him 3 angels. Now there is so much to discuss about these sort of things, right? God sends him angels. So if God didn't send him angels, then how would he have ever known that he was going to have a son the next year, right? The angels came, said, we're sorry, you're going to have a son. So if Hashem didn't take pity on him, when would all that have happened? So there's so much to evaluate as to what that means, as to what happens. But anyway, Sarah laughs. Unlike Avram, last week's Parsha, who laughed because, as I commented, he laughed a woohoo type of laugh, like, yay, I'm going to have a child, it's going to be amazing. Well, Sarah laughed in disbelief and not believing, and Hashem pulled her up on it.
Practicality.
Right? Hashem pulled her up on it, and then he came to Avram and sorted it out. Then, which we, according to most opinions, was the night of Pesach, that they came and told him he was going to be born on Pesach. Some people say he wasn't born on Pesach. Some say he was born 6 months later, 6 months pregnancy, and he was born on Rosh Hashanah. But either way, there's lots of difference of opinions. Then we have the Abraham praying. He davens that Hashem should save Sedom. Are there 10 people? Are there 9 people? 50 people? 40, 30, 20, 10? And Hashem says no. Then Sedom gets destroyed. Right? Every rabbi's favorite parsha, as I said last week. Right, we all talk about, especially in England, right, a fire and brimstone sermon, right? Well, this week, Parshas Vayera, we've got to speak the fire and brimstone, because literally there was fire and brimstone that was raining down. And I did Google this morning, what on earth is brimstone? Sulfur. Apparently it's sulfur, yes. Sulfur. A name for sulfur, right? Fire and sulfur raining down. And I did actually notice, having said that I Googled some of these places last week where they were from the geology, that actually in the back of the Art Scroll news section, they have all of the places, right? The War of the 4 Kings and the 5 Kings, from the covenant with Abraham to the Exodus. So they have, right, the life of the patriarchs. They have all these places, right? The sojourns of Abraham. So actually it does all the work for you. It tells you where Charon and Bavel and all Kastim. This is on page 1322. At the back of the Art Scroll, and here it has Sedom here in this valley here by going down to the Dead Sea, which we'll get to in a minute. So Hashem destroys Sedom. He saves Lot. We'll get into the specifics because that's what we're going to talk about. Then afterwards, Lot's children think they're the only ones left in the world. Right? They saw utter destruction. They never saw anybody else, and they thought, well, how on earth are we going to repopulate the earth? And we spoke about with Parshas Noach, about people who fear the world is ending and they make plans, right? Nuclear weapons, nuclear suits, and what do they call? I googled it and we had a name for them. Survivalists, thank you. Yes, that's right. We spoke a little bit about survivalist groups, right? So this was the ultimate survivalist group with Noach, we said. The Teva was like the ultimate survivalist, right? Built himself a Teva and so on. And also with Lot and his children, the survivalist issue. Now, how we're going to repopulate the earth. And the only choice they had, so they thought, was to use their father. So they did. We had two nations, Moab and Ammon, which play a huge part and huge role in Jewish history, of course, because Rus, the grandmother of David, which is obviously the forerunner of Moshiach and all that sort of stuff, came from Moab, and so on. Then we also have the story of Avimelech being the king of Mitzrayim, the king of, not Mitzrayim, that was last week, the king of the Gaza Strip, shall we say, Pelishtim taking Sarah. They did the same thing again, and Hashem punished Avimelech and then gave back Sarah. Then the birth of Yitzchak, the laning that we lane on Rosh Hashanah, both days, or first and second day rather, the laning for Hashem Pakad Sarah. You think it's easy as a Balkore, it's the Rosh Hashanah laning, so you're fine. Actually, it's very difficult, because it's a challenge, because the Rosh Hashanah laning, we lane in a completely different tune. Right? So when it comes to Chanukah laning and the Rosh Chodesh lanings that you find in Parshas Pinchas, then you have an easy week, right? Because, you've prepared it all year, the Chanukah laning you've done before, right? And that stuff, because it's the same tune. But when it comes to Rosh Hashanah laning, you've got this other tune in your head, so you somehow have to put that tune to the back of your head, right? And it's a much more distinctive tune, so your brain seems to remember that more, right? And you got to put that tune to the back of your head and concentrate on the real laning tune. And hopefully you don't switch between the two in the middle of laning. Then we have Avram kicking away Yishmael, and a lot of these things are preludes to the future and the generations and so on, which again you can think about how that affects today, in today's life, in today's day and age. And then, of course, we finish off with the Akedah, which literally translates as binding, when Avram was told to take his son Yitzchak. Again, so much to talk about. Why, what, who, and how. And Yitzchak went up. And I did actually see something this year that I never saw before, so I'm going to share that with you quickly. So he took him up, put him on the Akedah, put him on the altar. Then Hashem says, stop, don't do it. This was the place that was going to be the Beis HaMikdash. He took him up to the Beis HaMikdash, the place where the Mizbech, the future altar was going to be. And then Hashem gave him promises that it's going to be the Jewish people. It's interesting. That all the nations of the world will be blessed through the Jews, right? Which is the reason why the Jews are so popular in science and all these stuff, because Hashem promised that the Jews will be at the forefront of the world and so on. What does he say? There's been more Nobel Prize winners per capita of Jewish, right? It comes from this week's Parsha. Right.
The largest among any national.
Right, so it comes from this week's Parsha. But I did actually see something that I wanted to share before we get into the politics of Sedom. And that is, so we have this expression of Efer Yitzchak, the ashes of Yitzchak. It's the Gemara talks about it, Rashi mentioned it, that Hashem says, every year I will look at the ashes of Yitzchak and I will forgive the Jewish people on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. And we know the zechus, the merit, right? It's called Efer Yitzchak, Afro Shel Yitzchak, the ashes of Yitzchak. And the question they all ask is, what do you mean ashes of Yitzchak? Yitzchak wasn't burnt. The sheep was burnt. Excuse me. So the Marshana say, well, it means the ashes that would have been Yitzchak. Okay. There are some people that say, no, he really was killed and came back alive again, but there's a lot of people say that is a pshat that's hard to fit into the Chumash. Anyway, but I saw a pshat this week. I was listening to a shir, and he said it came from the Radak, although I couldn't see it inside the Radak of mine, and so on, but he quoted and said, what did Avram do? He took he took fire. Didn't say wood or stones. He took fire and he took a knife. And when it came to putting Yitzchak on, it says they lit up the stuff and he put the eish on the mizbeach. And then, so usually we think, okay, it means he got ready to light the fire. But according to Radak, no, he actually had the mizbeach alight first, because when it comes to the morning korbanos, the halacha is you have to put the fire of the mizbeach on first, and then you put the woods in. So you can't have the wood and then light the fire over the wood. That's no good. You have to have the fire first, and then you put the wood on top of the fire. That's the halacha. So it's the same as Avram. First he put the fire, and then he put Yitzchak. So in the few seconds that it took for Hashem to say, wait, don't kill him,
There was-
Yitzchak, right. So Yitzchak got a little bit burnt, right? Because of a big fire, so he got a little bit burnt. So there was a little bit of real ashes. And that might also help just from, Yitzchak went blind, they say, from the thing, right? So those of you who have done barbecuing, right, when you have wood chips burning, it gets in your eyes, right? And also if he was literally lying on top of the fire, right, all that smoke and the ash could have got in his eyes, and maybe that's what caused him later to go blind. But actually, according to this Radak, there was a little bit of real ashes, right, that Yitzchak had, and that's what Hashem remembers. So, okay, so that's a brief overview of the Parsha, and now I want to get stuck into Sedom, not literally because they were terrible, but let's get into some of the Sedom things. So first, let's go through the Chumash, and I meant to get myself a Chumash actually, but yeah.
The Malachim came to Sedom.
Right.
They told Lot, we have come to destroy Sedom.
Right.
So Hashem punished it.
The Malachim, you should have said Hashem is going to destroy it, yeah.
So why did they touch it? Why didn't they say Hashem told us we did?
So I heard of Shat because they were part of Hashem. Because a Malach is not an independent entity. A Malach is a creation of Hashem. So so they thought that because I'm enough of a manifestation of Hashem's power, it's really me. Anyway, whatever. These things are hard I don't fully understand. Okay, so actually we are introduced to Sedom last week. So I know those of you who go to the Dead Sea area might think that it's not a very fertile land, it's not a very nice place, but that's certainly the situation now. But if you look in last week's Parsha, Lot and Avraham, as we said, we discussed it a little bit last week, about you want to make peace. So with brothers, let's make peace. What was the next thing he said? You've got to leave. And sometimes to make peace, you have to separate. So we discussed that last week. Then what does it say? We're now on page 60. We're on page 60, right at the first pasuk. So it's chapter 13, pasuk Yod. Vayisalo Lot es Einov. Lot lifted up his eyes. Vayera es kol kikar hayarden. He saw the plain of the Jordan. So it tells you exactly where it is. Not exactly, but it gives you the rough area. We're talking about the Jordan Valley, right? He saw the Jordan Valley. Kichula mashke, on page 60. Kichula mashke, that it was all watered, right? It was beautiful. What's the word they use? Fertile land, beautiful stuff. Lifnei shaches Hashem es Sedom ve'es Amorah. Before Hashem destroyed Sedom and Amorah. Now listen to this. Kagan Hashem. It was as beautiful as the garden of Hashem. Eretz Mitzrayim, which is also as good as Eretz Mitzrayim, Boacha Soha, going towards Soha. So this just tells you how beautiful a location, how beautiful a place Sedom was, right? Kagan Hashem. It was almost as if it was as beautiful as the garden of Hashem, which refers obviously to Parshas Bereshis, when Hashem put Adam in the garden of Hashem. So what is this idea? So the Mefarshim explain, because what was in the garden of Hashem? How many rivers? 4. There were 4 rivers, the Pasuk said. And that's the idea here. It's fertile land because it was so moist and so wet and had the Jordan River running through it, right? So we know that you can live in a desert and it might be very nice. Dubai is built up beautifully, but if it has no... you have beautiful places beautiful scenery, you can eat, you can plant, right? That makes it good. But the Pasuk says very clearly in Pasuk 14, a few psukim later, Va'anshe Sedom. Sedom might have been the most beautiful place. And usually these things go hand in hand. Maybe we'll discuss a little bit of that. Va'anshe Sedom, Ra'im v'chatoim. Ra'im, they were evil. V'chatoim, and sinners. La Hashem, to Hashem ma'od, very much. So the pasuk Hashem testifies. This is not mysticism. This is not Gemara. This is actual pasuk telling you they were wicked and great sinners. La Hashem, to Hashem. So now fast forward to this week, and what does Hashem say about Sedom? Hashem says, give me a second.
Page 82.
Now we're on page 82. So Hashem says, Pasuk 20. Hashem says, Zaka Sedom v'Amorah ki rabba. The outcry of Sedom and Amorah is great. V'chatosam, and their sins ki kavda ma'od, has become very, very, very great. What does it mean, the outcry of Sedom? What is the outcry of Sedom? So this reminds us of a pasuk at the end of the Torah, which is if you don't lend money to somebody, you don't give money to the poor, What is this poor person going to do? V'kara alecha el Hashem. This poor man will call out to God because he has nobody else. Who's he going to call out to? He's going to complain to Hashem. This person didn't give me money. V'haya b'cha chet. And it will be on you a sin. So we see this idea that if you don't give money, you don't help out the poor, and people are desperate and they're starving, they've got nothing to do, they call out to Hashem. And it's also a lesson how you want to take this to current events, right? You talk about socialism and stuff throughout the generations, right? But socialism does come from a place. And you see the Torah talks about when people don't have money, what do? They scream and they shout. So when it comes now to this pasuk, Za'akas Sedom v'Amorah, the screaming of Sedom v'Amorah, what's it referring to? It's referring to the fact that there are people within Sedom who are literally starving to death and screaming out and complaining to Hashem. And a second thing is v'chatosam, they've got lots of sins. Okay. So now let's miss out all this stuff of Avram davening. And now let's go see the story of Sedom. Now let's go see what actually, the only story we have about the people of Sedom. We hear a lot about them. They are evil, they are wicked. But let's actually see the only story really that we have about Sedom. What happens? These angels come. This is now page 84, the very bottom. Yeah. They come and they come into Lot's house. Pasuk 4, 84:4. Terem yishkavu, before they'd even sat down. V'anshei o'ir, the men of the city. Anshe Sedom, nasabu al habayis, they're surrounding the house. Listen to this. Mina'ar ve'ad zokein, from child until elderly people. Kol ha'am mekotzeh. So what does this talk to you? This is like a riot. We're not talking about a knock on the door. Hello, what are you doing? Right, your local. What do they call the people in our development? It's not the little HOA knock. Excuse me, you've got unwelcome visitors. They're not on your HOA list. You didn't mark them in. Sorry, it wasn't one or two people knocking. It wasn't a nice little email. You've got 20 hours or whatever it is to get them out.
Intruders.
It was the whole town. Minar v'adza'okein kol ha'am. This was like a riot. This was whatever words you want to use. You imagine it, right? The whole town. Whoa! It's a riot. It's a right. Think about it. Why? Because two men went into a house. Vayiku el Lot, and they called to Lot. Vayomru ayei ha'anashim hasher bo elecha aloylu. Where are these men? Hoitziei milenu. Bring them out. V'neida osam, and we will know them. Ayi, we will sodomize them, which is probably where the word sodomy comes from, right? Because that's what Sedom were famous for. Now you know why I said on YouTube I will give this a non-kids rating, and so on. So Lot goes out. Please don't. I've got two daughters that are unmarried. Take them. Don't do anything to my men. Now, of course, even nowadays, you think about giving over women and rape and so on, it's terrible. But at least back then, Lot, and this is why he was saved, he had some semblance of morality. So his married daughters are married, you can't give those. Men, obviously, that's immoral. So what is the best? Unmarried women, okay? But you have to think about it in those terms. I mean, nowadays, to say such a thing, right? You can't say such a thing. But in those terms, okay, at least don't be immoral necessarily. And what did they say? Vayomru gesh hol. I love this expression because I like to translate it as get lost. Right? That's what we used to say in England all the time. Right? Get lost.
Get out of here.
Yeah, get out of here. Vayomru gesh hol. Get lost. What sort of an answer is this? Vayomru echad balogo vayishpot shofot. When people come to sojourn and they want to judge, aton nora lachomehem. We're going to do worse to you than we would have done to them, because you're now defending them. Oh, you're now defending them. Goodbye to you. And they wanted to destroy the door. So that's the story we have. So we get this idea. It wasn't a very nice place. All of a sudden you're coming. Not just one or two people from the HOA, the whole town. Can you imagine? You get home and the whole development where you live, Avalon Trails or Kings Point or whatever it is. Can you imagine? You have thousands of people from Kings Point knocking on the door. Excuse me, screaming, shouting. Right? Can you imagine? This is not a very...
Like a lynching mob.
That's a good word to use. Exactly. They wanted to lynch them. Exactly. A mob. That's a good word. Rabble mob.
But there's also something else that crossed my mind,
Oh, go on.
which is relevant to today.
Right.
Pasuk says, the young and the old. The
Right.
young were the instigators.
Right. Yeah, they
Like
were
we
first.
see
Yeah.
today.
Right. 100%. So you can take as many messages for today's day and age as you want, but let's at least try and see from Sedom's point of view. And again, we'll say one more pasuk, and this is in Yechezkel, which you don't have. You have Yechezkel, chapter 16, verse 49. The pasuk says, Hinei zeh avon Sedom. Behold, this is the iniquity of Sedom, Achosech, your sister. Go'on sivas lechem. They were so haughty and mighty, v'shalvash hashket hayala, and they had so much good going for them. But let's read it in English. There you could see. Behold, this was the sin of Sedom, your sister. She and her daughters had pride, sore fit of bread, and peaceful serenity. But they did not strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy. They were haughty, and they committed an abomination before me, so I removed them in accordance with my law. So the Cheskel, the prophet, says quite clearly, they were haughty, gaiva, they didn't strengthen the poor, they had pride, and they did abominations, which we know refers mainly to sodomy, because the Torah refers to that act as an abomination, and therefore that's what it's all about. So you see again this idea of not helping the poor. And Sedom is given a bad rep in the Gemara too. The Gemara doesn't focus on the sodomy side of it. The Gemara and the halacha. And as I like to say to people, when things are codified in halacha, that brings it into a completely different realm. So we have in Pirkei Avos, I should have got a siddur here, but never mind. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, chapter 5, Mishnah Yud, says, there are 4 things that you can think of. Omer shali, shali, what's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. Sorry, what's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine, zu rasha, that's a wicked man, right? I'm going to steal everything you have. Omer, if you say what's mine is yours and what's yours is yours, that's a tzaddik. Yeah, you take whatever you need. But now we have one in the middle. Omer shali shali, what's mine is mine. Shalcha shalcha, and what's yours is yours. Zuhu midas peininus, that's middle. V'yesh omrim zuhu midas Sedom. And some people say that is the midah of Sedom. So we get an insight. What's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. Now that doesn't seem too bad. I'm not stealing from you. I'm not taking anything from you. You keep whatever you have. Shalcha, shalcha, yours is yours. But shali, shali, what's mine is mine. And the Gemara, in many places, has the expression, koifin al midas Sedom. You may recognize that expression. That means we force and we make halachos to try and go out of the midah of Sedom. Which means, to be very paraphrased, basically, if something happens where somebody benefits and you take no loss from it whatsoever, you take 0 loss from it, the halacha says we cannot charge him for it. If he damages you, you got to pay. If he causes you a loss, whatever loss it is, he has to pay. But if he did something without your permission, and he caused you 0 loss whatsoever, we in halacha cannot charge him for it. And it's brought down in halacha, it's called kofin amidas Sedom. And the example here that one of the examples is, Hadar b'chotze chaveru shelo midayt. If you live in somebody's house without his permission, squatting, as we would say. Right? Now, there are many conditions. It's got to be a house that is not rented out, because if I rent it out to people and you are squatting in it, you're costing me a loss, because now I can't rent it out to him and get money. But if it's just a house that's just sitting there doing nothing, and by you living in it for a day or 2 days without permission, you have caused no loss and no damage whatsoever, it's called zeh nen v'zeh lo chasar. You benefited and I didn't lose. You cannot force him in Beis Din to pay. Even if you say get out, then of course you can remove him, right? You don't have to let him stay there forever. You don't have to let him. That's not a problem. I can say, no, it's my house, get out. That's fine. But you cannot then charge him for the times he stayed there. Okay, there's any nuanced halachos or whatever, but that's what's called kofin al midas Sedom. We say to you, excuse me, mister, did you make a loss from this? No. Did you suffer any negative effects because of what he did? No. Did he benefit? What?
Expenses, electricity.
Oh, okay, fine. As I said, there are many nuances. If he used your electricity, you can charge him for the electricity. Right, okay, that's what I said. If he damages you or he costs you expenses, 100%. No question. But we're trying to find a case where he did not cause you any damage whatsoever, then you cannot charge him, say, well, he was in my house, whatever. Okay. So we see codified in halacha, there is this idea that we, kofin al midas Sedom, we make halachas based on the antithesis of what Sedom used to do. So I used to think this was terrible. But actually I heard many, many years ago, I think it was Rabbi Spolter from the Chabad of Western, and he phrased it so beautifully. He said, what is this that we're talking about? And there's many things more to talk about, we're trying to keep it short. He said, this is the ultimate, purest, capitalist economy. That's what Sedom was. What's mine is mine. What's yours is yours. They felt they didn't think they were evil. They thought this is our politics. This is how we choose to live and govern this state. That we are going to be the purest capitalist state. Which means there are no handouts. There are no government programs. There are no food banks. There is no nothing. You earn money, you can buy things. If you don't earn money, you starve and you die, goodbye. That's how it started. And we're going to go on in a minute. But Sedom was the purest capitalist society, right? We talk about the opposite with the left and Marxism and all this sort of stuff. This is completely the opposite. This is the purest capitalist. You make money, spend it, you survive. You can't earn money, you don't earn money, you have no money, you'll die on the streets. Nobody will help you. Nobody will give you a break. Nobody will hand you any food. And that's what other sources say, that if they found you giving money to the poor, if they found you giving food to the poor, that was a capital offense. Pun, right? They would kill you for that, right? You gave a piece of bread to the poor, they would kill you. Now, I'm not sure how that worked within things like marriage, right? Did your wife, would she be entitled? I'm not sure.
It's covered. I would argue with that guy, but it's covered.
Okay. And how does that work with children?
Are covered.
Okay, yeah. So there must have been, right? There must have been some. But in terms of outsiders, we all look. Now, from what I understand of that time of the year, that time of the area, Sedom also was a very popular trade route, because you had Egypt down here, and that was the Fertile Crescent. They went up the Jordan all the way to all those areas, what's it called, Mesopotamia, whatever, around there. So it was a very affluent place, right? Because people come with Mitzrayim laden with goods to Egypt, laden with goods from Egypt. So it was a very, very capitalist place, a lot of wealth, and so on, and that's what their issue was. However, and this is what we want to talk about. And again, I'm not getting into each political system, but a lot of the political systems that have gone bad over the years, a lot of them start okay. They start with good intentions, and then you end up with what this Mishnah said, this Pasuk said. They got haughty. Like it says in Parshas Ha'azinu, when Moshe Rabbeinu was warning the Jews, Vayishman Yeshurun, the Jews will get fat, literally in my case, and it means you'll get so much money and possessions and everything will be going good. Vayivot. What's the thing when you have money, you have stuff, you get carried away. You forget Hashem. You get carried away with your own self-importance. And then what goes along, and you can talk about modern politics, but I'm going to stick to the olden politics. What goes hand in hand with pride and governance? Casting off morality. They go hand in hand, right? It was interesting, right? That Mandami threw in his speech last night. I heard it, all the stuff he was saying, but he threw in stuff. I was like, aha, he threw in about transgenders are welcome and all these sort of things, right? I'm not arguing with that, they shouldn't be welcome. But it was just interesting that he mentioned that in his speech, because hand in hand, a lot of these things go with get rid of morality. I'm fine, I've made my own money, I'm rich, I'm successful, I don't need God anymore, we don't need God. God is for the people who don't have anything. You pray to a God, yeah, good, go. And if there's no God, then there's no laws of morality. I do what I want. I'm in charge of my own body, I can do what I want, when I want, how I want. Which is why I'm going to go off topic here and say something really controversial. But my feeling as to a lot of this transgender agenda is that everybody wants to be in control today. I want to be able to control everything that I do. You can't tell me what to do. I'll do whatever I please. I will go with whomever, whatever, do whatever. However, there's only one thing that I have no control over. No matter how hard I try, the one thing that I cannot have I can change my body, whatever, is what sex I was born. That is predetermined for me. Now, if you don't believe in God, fine. Not fine, but you know what I mean. But somebody else, something else, genetics, is deciding whether I'm a man or I can't cope with that. No. I need to be in control. So now I will decide. I will tell you Excuse me, it's my decision. I will be in control whether I will be a man or whether I will be a woman. And therefore, if I decide, you know what, I'm now going to be a woman, then I may or may not decide that I'm going to change myself to be a woman. Why? Because I can't, that's just my controversial view of stuff. I don't want to discuss that because that's not really the topic here, but that's how it goes back to Sedom. They started off in a way, and then they got carried away more and more. They got carried away with immorality and so on, because you think you're indestructible. You think you get carried away, you think you're special, you think you are untouchable, nothing can happen, we have our society, it's all going well. And what also goes hand in hand with these sort of things? Corruption. Right? Corruption goes hand in hand with a lot of these systems, and you talk about length of time that people are being in government and so on. Usually, I bet if you run a historical poll, even of the last 20, 30, 50 years, all the people that have ended up in trouble with corruption, it's never been at the start. Right? It's always been as they've gone. When they start off with good intentions, we do things the right. And again, my father's in politics, I know there's a lot of pressures and stresses. You have people coming up to you all the time. Right? Will you do this for me? Right? And right, the temptations and stuff and so on. But usually, right after time, people say, "Oh yeah," you get carried away, you get tempted. Goes hand in hand with corruption.
It's how somebody who makes $174,000 a year, after 5 years, is worth several millions of dollars.
Okay, yeah, right, and so on.
Yes, but that's
right.
But we expect that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you can argue corruption. So, why is Hashem so angry about this? So we talked about being purely capitalist, and Hashem is really angry at this. So much so that he rains down fire and brimstone. Okay? He doesn't do that for, even in the olden days when bad things were happening, like the flood and all this sort of stuff. So Sedom must have been really bad. So what was so terrible about that? Because what is the Torah's view? What is the Torah's view of politics system? The Torah does believe in capitalism. We know that because the Torah talks about wealth. The Torah talks about money. The Torah talks about becoming rich and blessings and riches and whatever. So we do believe in capitalism. The Gemara is full of stuff. But, and this is a very big but, right? There has to be I was going to say element, but it's less than an element. It's capitalism, but there has to be a socialist element. There has to be tzedakah. There has to be ways.
That's not socialism.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I may have used the wrong words.
There has to be an element of morality.
Compassion. Okay.
Because capitalism works on exchange.
Right.
Now, if I can build the best mousetrap in the world, but if nobody will buy it, I'm not going to be wealthy. What you're talking about is a group of people who think, like the Sodomites, that they know it all.
Right.
And their system, whatever political, psychological, philosophical, is the end all and the be all. And that is what causes people to become corrupt. They hold themselves above civil law, criminal law, moral law.
Right, like the Pasuk in Yechezkel said, yeah.
I would argue with this rabbi you spoke about, because if you don't buy if the dentist doesn't buy the products that the company I work for sells, I won't have a paycheck.
Correct, and then you'll die.
But that's it's about exchange, and it's an exchange of values. There's no such thing as, quote, pure capitalism, because it doesn't exist in a vacuum. So yeah.
They're supposed to give the 10% like the tithing and everything.
Oh, so that's how we see manifest, right.
That's
right. So we see from these halachas in the Torah, right, that there has to be, whatever word you want to use to describe it, there has to be a fallback, there has to be a catch, there has to be a way of looking out for people.
Yeah.
For your community.
Right.
Why, if you make as much money as you
Just last night, Rav Papa was a beer merchant.
Right.
And it's in the Gemara.
Right, that's how he became very wealthy,
about. And he sold his beer in Tishrei, when beer, this date palm wine, was abundant, but he let people pay him in Nisan, but he charged a higher price in Nisan. I forget the term. I just was introduced.
Right.
Begins with a pay. I can't remember the term. So that's where we are right now. But this is capitalism. I'm willing to pay more to get it now, and
Okay.
have an interest-free loan.
Right. Okay.
That's what we're talking. That's capitalism.
Right.
That's capitalism.
Okay, but that's right. So now going forward to as Edward was saying, so that has to be, that is the Torah view. That yes, you can make money, you're allowed to make money, and importantly, you're allowed to spend money, right? So much so that the Gemara talks about that a person is not allowed to give away all of his money, except if he's about to die. That's different. Why? Because Hashem gave you money for you to use it. I was having this debate about. There was a big podcast last week about how people called on the Meaningful Minutes podcast. It was talking about how people, mainly up north, when they were doing the figures, who are earning over $250,000 are still below the poverty line because of basically yeshiva and camp tuition, which is just crippling because these people are making over the threshold that they're not getting money off. And so on, and all the other difficult things and decisions and so on that goes into a Jewish money. So why was I saying this? And then there was somebody there was actually saying, it was interesting. So we're talking about, people are spending fortunes on they said the average price of a wedding is $150,000. The average price of a bar mitzvah is over $20,000. And there was two people there, and I can't remember the names. One of the people was saying, no, we should make it that there are maximums, right? So everybody should be able to, right? There's a bar mitzvah, this is what you do, 100 people, the wedding is 20 people, whatever it is, right? I mean, the other way around. The bar mitzvah is 20 people, the wedding 100 people, and everybody should pay and do the same. The other guy was saying, no. He said, if you have the money, if Hashem has blessed you with the money, you should be able to make your expansive wedding. That's your prerogative that Hashem has given you. But he was saying, the people who can't afford it, they should have no stigma. And I saw this myself when I came from England. People made a bris. You made a bris in a shul because people like to make a bris in a shul. There's an Indian to do a bris in a shul in a mokum kadosh as opposed to a house, if possible. Not always possible, whatever, and so on. And then whoever was there, they would give cakes and kichels.
You're
Cheap.
supposed also to invite some people who.
Right, and then they would take 10, 12, 15, whatever, people, close family, back to their house later and make a seudah. You want to invite? I come here, and seems to be, the way it's done, is that the whole shul is invited to the bris. So, a couple of times when I've been at these places, say the whole shul, I don't know the people, and they don't really mean me. So it becomes very expensive, right? And also a wedding. I talked about Rabbi Spolter beforehand. So his first wedding, I was part of a shul, so I was at the wedding. The whole shul were at the wedding. It was like 500-600 people. Mm-hmm. So, wow. So my wedding, we had 400 people at the reception for the chuppah. So we have split weddings in England. You have the chuppah and the reception, very cheap. You invite people to the chuppah so they see you getting married, and then you give them cakes and kichels, a bit fancier, right, than you do for a bris. And then later on, you come back for the private people. So we had 400, 500 people at the chuppah. My father was a Rav of a shul, I was a Rav of a shul, so we had plenty of people. And at the dinner we had like 150 later. So he was saying, no, let people, and I agreed with him. If Hashem has given you the money, if you're a multi-millionaire and you want to spend 5 million on a wedding, go for it. Goes on to 8. If that's what you want to do, you have the money, you want to spend 5 million building a shul building, fine, great. So that's the Torah view. You can spend the money Hashem has given you, spend it. But you see with the mitzvahs of giving to the Kohen, and who Kohen doesn't work, right? Because he doesn't have a portion of land. He works for us in the Beis HaMikdash all the time. The Leviim, the same. So,
but that's capitalism.
Well, not the Sedom version.
No, this is okay. I have a Kohen.
Right.
Okay, so the Kohen does his job. Now we pay the Kohen.
Right.
That's capitalism.
That's how we view it. That's how you
that's
should view it. Right. But what about then the mitzvah of tzedakah? Leket, shikha, and peyah, right? Where you leave corners of your field, where you leave the bits that fall down. So you definitely see there's this idea. So the Kohen and the Levi, you could say you're paying them, you're exchanging goods, right? Yeah. Which is where you could talk about some taxation. You're paying for the police force, whatever. So by your taxes, you're paying the police who are working on your behalf. Okay. As I say, you can get into a very deep discussion. But I just wanted to bring out a little bit of the Sedom politics from this week's Parsha. But you see, Hashem did not approve. And the key to understanding, in my opinion, why is the expression Zakas Hashem, Zakas Sedom V'Amor, the screaming. Who is screaming? Who is crying out? It's the pasuk in Yechezkel. It's the poor people.
It's the poor people.
Because that's what Hashem doesn't like. That's what really drives, as we would say in today's expression, that's really pushes his buttons, right? That's really gets Hashem mad and all worked up. So mad that he rained down fire and brimstone and fire and sulfur. So again, I'm not going to tell you, because everybody has their own opinions and their own views, how to take it forward. But it's interesting to look at some of these Torah examples. And again, you look at other examples through Tanakh of certain cultures and certain systems that they used, and you see. But I will finish off, with one idea. And again, you see this today. And whether it's fascism, whatever expression it is, right? Coming off the Great Depression in the 1930s, right? If it wasn't for the Great Depression, if it wasn't for that terrible, and in Germany after the First World War, they didn't give them stuff, so they all start. If it wasn't for that, maybe fascism never would have started. That's a debate that you can have. I'm not a historian, but I'm just saying very briefly. So you see a lot of the big political moves, on either side, the extremes, I should say. A lot of the extremes come about when people feel oppressed. Either way. And you see that again from this week's Parsha Sedom. Hashem took on account of the people who were repressed and oppressed in Sedom, right? I don't know how many people we're talking about. There must have been a lot of them. If the screams are reaching Hashem, I mean, you think about in Mitzrayim. Again, this is not really a deep way of thinking, but it says all of a sudden, Vatal Shavosam and Hashem. They screamed out from the work. How long were they working? 86 years. Until Hashem heard. Now, what that means, again, that's a big philosophical debate. There are levels, whatever. But it took 86 years of the Jewish people working in Mitzrayim for Hashem. Again, I'm just saying it in words, but Chas v'Shalom don't want to make it sound like I'm disparaging Hashem. I'm just trying to bring out a point. It took 86 years for him to hear.
Whatever reason he had.
Right, exactly. So now, when we think about Sedom, think about what it must have been like. How many people, there must have been loads of people we're talking about, because people came to Sedom for the promise of a good life. Sedom was the place. It's Kagan Hashem. It was like the garden of God. I mean, who doesn't want to go to the garden of God? Who doesn't want to go to the place of, they must have been like, oh, this is the Sedom dream. You come here, you have a life, you have money. So you can imagine, Sedom must have been packed with people chasing a good life, chasing something, right?
Maybe Hashem was waiting for them to do the right thing.
Of course, Hashem gives people time and do to show 100%. And I didn't want to go down that route of why. I'm just trying to bring out a point. If you see, it took 86 years in Mitzrayim, and of course he promised Avram would be 400 years. So I'm just trying to use a basic idea that it wasn't just a few people, 5, 10 people. I must have been talking about a lot of, slums and homelessness and stuff, right? But then it crossed over that as soon as you see strange men, the whole town. Now, just imagine if they would have taken out these two men, right? Let's say Lot would have given them these two men, right? Can you imagine what sort of maybe we shouldn't think about that. That's not a good thing to think about necessarily. But just imagine, okay, you've got the whole town screaming and shouting and baying for blood, and if they said, here are these two men, can you just imagine the pile-on? So why was Lot saved? Just looking, of course he was Avraham. Lot stood up to this, okay? Lot was involved, he stood up to this. And again, there's a whole story, why did Lot go, what did he think, right?
To find a solution.
Right, but he stood up to it, okay? He stood up to the mob. Literally, the baying, and he didn't know these people were angels yet, right? He didn't know they were angels. He stood up for these men. So Hashem said, just because you're involved in a situation, you're in a country, you're in a whatever it is, that doesn't mean you have to go along with it. I hear so many times people say, Rabbi, I had no voice, I decided to go along. I said, no. I said, even if whatever is going to pass, and it's going to happen, and it's going to work, but it doesn't mean you have to add your agreement to it. So a 12-0 vote will become a 11-1 vote. So it still passes like crazy. But you should always try and do the right thing. Right? You all hear times in life people say, you know what, I get swept up with the tide. Everyone is voting, I'll vote this way too. I'll go along with it. No. Remember Lot. He stood up to Sedom. And this was no easy task, because you saw they were baying for blood. The mob, what was it you said? A lynching mob. Were literally outside his door. And he stood up to them. and ultimately he got saved. So in our own lives, we should take that message that, what we believe is right. And that doesn't mean we're always right. No, that's the whole challenge of life, right? We think we're right. We think we're doing the right thing. Sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. But we have to stand up and defend what we believe, whether it's Torah values or in your own lives or whatever it is. So that's just a small little analogy of Sedom and so on. As I say, this week's Parsha is packed with so many things that are, difficult to understand and to try and. But at the end of the day, we have to take some lessons, because that's the whole point of Bereshis, right? The stories are there to teach us some lessons. So why did Hashem keep the story of Sedom in? To teach us what a system of running a country should look like, how we should look like it, to be aware of the pitfalls of stuff, and to remember Lot, right? Lot goes down as a strange figure. On the one hand, he was Avram's nephew. On the other hand, he was, and the one thing I haven't yet worked out in my own mind is there's one other story we have of Sedom, and that's when they got captured. So if you remember last week, there was the war of the 4 kings and the 5 kings. So I haven't worked out how that fits into all of this, because they were overrun by the 4 kings, and it says they took Rechush Sedom va'Amorah vayilechu. They took all the spoils of Sedom and Amorah, and they left, and Avram went to save him. Now, this story of the destruction of Sedom took place after they said Avram was going, 3 days after Avram had his bris, which we know he had his bris at 99, right? When did Avram leave to go on his journeys? He was 75. The Torah says he was 75 when he left Haran. And that's when he had the famine, and then he went to Mitzrayim. So you've got to give it at least a couple of years for the story of Sedom. So within 20, so they've got taken over, Avram rescues them, and somewhere within 20 years, exactly. So again, I'm not sure how all that fits in.
Well,
it's,
9/11, 2001, and 24 years later, you've got...
Right. So it could be there was a vacuum, you're saying. That once the 4 kings destroyed Sedom and Avram rescued them, now there was a vacuum of leadership and it got overrun with corruption. I don't know. So that I haven't yet thought of
teaching history. Santayana
Right.
says it best. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to
Right.
repeat it.
Anyway, so I welcome your thoughts on how to, think through this a little bit more. But it's
take a lesson from the past.
definitely, yeah.
Well, those were the translation of his words.
Okay, so we'll end the recording.